The body is a vehicle, consciousness the driver. Yoga is the path, and the chakras are the map. So, continuing on our journey into the chakras, if you haven't guessed by now, understanding the chakras is akin to understanding the cosmic universal flow. It's a scaling and harmonizing of vibration between polarized frequencies. Just looking at the waveform alone, the vibration of red and the vibration of blue are undoubtedly completely different, and our chakras are the exact same way. The concept of the chakras ultimately explains that our thoughts and feelings all resonate to different frequencies within us. It's an explanation for why generally people consider that feeling takes place in the heart and the belly, and thinking happens in the mind. Finding a harmony here between these frequencies is so important because it's all too easy for us to get lost in our feelings and lose all sense of logic with the world. And it's just as easy for people to become so mental in their approach to life that they disconnect from any sense of empathy or emotional connection to one another. It's for this reason that we created Esoteric Emotional Mastery, a full-scale course designed to help you in mastering these different vibrations within. So click the link in the description if you wanna learn more about that. And now, back to the show. Now, when a person is living within the realm of one particular chakratic energy, their whole world can be colored by the energy of that frequency. It's kind of like a lens through which everything in existence is interpreted for us. In order to explain this clearly, here's an example. You remember the qualities of each chakra that we talked about earlier? Again, briefly, the overview is survival, sex, willpower, love, expression, mindfulness, and finally, higher understanding. So when a soul, sometimes also known as a little fractal of that which we sometimes call spirit, cosmic consciousness, or God, comes into a new reality in the cycle of incarnation, which is a long way of saying when a baby is born, they have one thing on their mind and one thing only, survival. They want to be able to survive and stay here to support their physical existence as long as they can. Their whole focus is on being able to survive. They're almost entirely dependent on their guardians during their formative years, and generally speaking, it's the mother and the father who take up that role. Depending on how well mommy and daddy make the infant feel safe and nurtured, the quicker the child can transcend and move on to the next level. Nursing is also a natural way to bring the child into a state of safety, as well as explore the next chakra simultaneously. See, the root chakra is synonymous with support from the environment around you. And if a child is growing up in an unsafe space, or there's a lack of nurturing to keep the child feeling safe and explorative, it will take longer for a solid transition to take place and can even cause long-term damage to the understanding of the child, and they could grow up with many traumas, anxiety, and pain. All of these can be dealt with and explored later in life too, but it's definitely a much smoother process if we receive loving support right from the beginning. But it doesn't always happen that way. But don't worry, if that was your childhood, it means there's an abundant opportunity for healing at your door. Now, the moment survival has been achieved, it becomes clear to spirit that there are one or two more chakras available. There are actually two, but spirit may sometimes only see one at first. The next step is that spirit will usually want to make contact with other beings in this reality. After all, we are naturally social creatures. This is almost instinctual. When you're a baby, that's usually interpreted as making contact with your mother and father. It is one of the youngest and earliest actions compelled by the sacral chakra, and it is sexual in nature. Just look at Freud's Oedipus complex, which is not as weird as it sounds, at least when you understand the deeper meaning behind it. As you get older and your sacral chakra matures within you, the same as your other chakras, the desire for contact shifts from the innocence of support from your parents to a different form that I'm sure we're all aware of. Physically, we call it puberty, and you might remember all those uncomfortable talks you got in biology class, but we'd rather not. The essence of the sacral is to reach out, locate, and make contact with the life that exists in the world around you. At a young age, it covers everything from holding your mother to snuggling a kitty, although this energy has in a way been programmed out of us by our own media and peer groups at this point. Very few people have cuddle puddles nowadays, but I guess snuggling kitties is still socially acceptable. So the next stage is where things get interesting. Generally, for a soul who only has access to these lower chakras, their consciousness is rather self-centered, which is natural. It's why children sometimes have a hard time perceiving the wants and needs of the larger social body around them because they are still focused on and learning within their own personal growth, wants, and needs. Unless of course they're an Aquarius, in which case there might be a possibility of them getting mad at everyone for seeing what everyone needs and struggling to communicate it, but I digress. Now that spirit has survived and made contact with other life in the world, the third chakra that's available is called the solar plexus and deals with willpower. In a nutshell, spirit wants to know how and why things work. What are the laws of this new world? How does gravity work? How do you do things? Using your willpower, you try to control the physical world, picking up toys and playing with them, moving things around and, just generally doing stuff, often to the dismay of our parents. We're all familiar with the age called the terrible twos. It's a common age when spirit is very interested and curious and full of willpower and wants to know everything about the world around it, to test it and to see what it can do and what it can't do. A child from here will usually continue until it's satisfied in its basic understanding of reality. And sometimes a child will grow up for many years learning purely in these states with little awareness of anything higher. You see, for most young people growing up, they are unaware that there's a change in the directions after the third chakra. It comes in the form of something we call a half step, also sometimes called a mirror wall, which hides the next 4 chakras from view. A child usually isn't aware of the many chakra lessons to come or how much more to life there really is. On Earth, even when we become adults, we may still not know that there are higher centers in the body. You're probably familiar with the hoity-toity businessman archetype, purely focused on their own status and wealth, and don't care about whoever they have to step on to level up their personal game. Well, anyone resonating with that mindset is definitely locked into their solar and root chakras, but they can't see the heart because the sacral, the feeling and connecting with others empathically, is really not that active. And this is how we ultimately move into the higher centers, is by mastering the bottom 3 in order to perceive and move into something greater. A major exception to this though, is found within the phenomena of the so-called New Age children. The indigo, crystal, and rainbow kids as they're often described, or whatever you might call them in the system of your choosing. In short, these are children who are believed to possess special, unusual, and sometimes supernatural traits or abilities, at least according to any psychological study of them. Oftentimes, these kids are described as old souls who have incarnated into this lifetime to help us break through the old rigid systems and pave the way to a new world. And sometimes they're seen as souls from a much higher dimension who are new to this earth, helping to ground in a higher frequency. The first mention of indigo children comes from concepts developed in the 1960s and 70s by parapsychologist Nancy Ann Tapp, where she talked about life colors, which she believed were the single color of the aura that remains constant in most people from the cradle to the grave. As the world moved into the psychedelic revolution of the 60s and early 70s, Nancy noticed that reports of children with indigo auras being born were growing up and getting much more common as we were evolving as a species. These so-called indigo children generally have a vast wealth of spiritual experience under their belt, seemingly out of nowhere, being able to meditate, understanding the chakras, and do energy work at a very early age. This is mostly because they remember their past lives much more easily than other people, so they seem much more mature than other kids of their age. It makes sense, especially if they remember having done this whole life thing hundreds of times. They know what they're doing. Now, some people in recent years though have argued that indigo and the like are the real cause behind conditions like ADHD or just ADD, but this ultimately all comes down to what you believe, as naturally, the view in medicine is that ADHD is a defect. I also wonder how low-vibing foods that many kids are eating affects them on a cellular level. But hey, we have a Healing with Food movie if you wanna go deeper onto that topic. Regardless, on the subject of ADD, while today it's classified as a disorder, if you're a parent, the idea of having a gifted child is much more appealing than the idea of a broken one. And it may inspire creative action to support them rather than just feeling terrible that your problem child sucks, Because let's be real, they don't suck. They're awesome. They just need some unique support in being able to see it and tap into the magic within them. We're actually working on a course for conscious parenting inside of Spirit Mysteries, and we'll keep you posted on how that's coming along soon. Anyways, some of the other traits common to these new children though are stuff like high levels of empathy and emotional intelligence at young ages, often seeming much older than they are or having an older energy about them, often being perceived by friends and family as being strange or even alien, possessing a clear sense of self-definition and purpose, showing a strong innate subconscious spirituality from early childhood, and even usually having a resistance to rigid, control-based paradigms of authority. We sometimes even see natural or innate spiritual wisdom and gifts coming through these children in immaculate splendor. However, it's important not to put too much thought into labels or how we define these spiritual gifts, as there is definitely not any kind of true hierarchy to this stuff. Just because some of us come into spirituality at a much older age doesn't mean that we're any less spiritual than some of the new generation. Especially if your auric field describes whether you're an indigo, rainbow, or crystal child, then putting in the effort to raise your vibration and evolve your consciousness can help you to become any kind of being you wish to be. With practice, an indigo child can become a crystal child. With more practice, a crystal child can become a rainbow child. And with psychedelics, any child can become Thoth the Atlantean. I'm just kidding, please don't give psychedelics to children. Also, if anyone tells you that they are more sensitive or more spiritual than you, chances are they're caught in a little ego trap of their own. As Jesus put so eloquently, get that speck out of your eye before you try and say there's a log in someone else's. Okay, I'm paraphrasing, but you get the point. Ultimately, much of this world is still living in the first 3 chakras right now, but that is changing fast, especially with the help of these new generations of super psychic kids. Mother Earth is waking up.